Hello everybody, welcome back to BareRose Garage. What are we doing today? Well, let's keep deep diving in on the S10 Chevy chassis swap, and actually why I prefer the four-wheel drive over the two-wheel drive. Now, there's a couple of, like I said in my other video, you don't have to run these as a four-wheel drive if you don't want to. All you got to do is just drop that front diff out and she runs as a two-wheel drive. But here are some of the hidden advantages of the four-wheel drive, and which actually kind of makes it better than the two-wheel drive. Here we go. Hey, number one, we got the inspector out. That's right, Inspector Eddie is on duty. He's going to help us here, unfortunately. So if you hear him in the background, yep, that's what he's doing. He's helping us explain this. Shut up. Okay, to deep dive in right here at the start, this is the four-wheel drive A-arm setup. Now, on a two-wheel drive, I can show you over here in just a second. The two-wheel drive sets up on top. The four-wheel drive, the A-arms are connected to the side here. Now, what is the advantage of that? Well, on a four-wheel drive, they wanted to keep that front tire as straight as possible. Why? Because it helps with the drive. It takes a lot of the angle out of the drive shaft that's going through and driving the front wheels. So they try to keep that as straight as possible. It does vary a little as it goes up and down through its motion, but with those two A-arms working together with the torsion bar, it helps keep that straight in line as it goes through its suspension up and down. So that's the first thing that I like about them. The second one, well, yeah, it's a torsion bar. So all you got to do is come back under there, right about there. There's a bolt down there. You can loosen it and drop this front end down, or you can tighten it up and it raises the front end up. Easily adjusted ride height, just like all of the old Mopars. Yep, Chevy did it too. Yeah, it follows through with quite a few Chevys, GM products as well. But anyway, we all know the story of the torsion bars and why they're pretty cool. But anyway, that's one of the reasons I like them. And like I said, you don't have to run the front diff if you don't want to, unless you want to make an all-wheel drive hot rod that's good in any weather condition. Then you go ahead and run the front diff. Anyway, so that's the first part of it. The other one, like I was explaining in the other one, is these offset wheels. You notice on the four-wheel drive ones, they sit way out here. Well, on the two-wheel drive, as I'll show you over here, on what I'm going to call my mistake. Yep, what happened here? Well, I was watching this YouTube stuff and everybody was talking about how easy it was to put a Shoebox Ford on an S10 chassis. Well, after watching a whole bunch of those videos, I said, you know what? I'm going to try it. It looks pretty doggone easy. Well, I found out the shortcomings the hard way on what happens when you use a two-wheel drive S10 on one of these Shoebox Fords. Number one, you heard me talk about center of headlight. Now, of course, don't take that as a golden rule. I use it on these because the headlight is so far over. Gives you a good reference point. Anyway, on this shoebox, you can see how far inside that tire is. Now you look on the side here and you'll see what I'm talking about. It sits way inside. And the rear end. Back here, you can see how far inside that rear end sits on a shoebox. It needs to come out just about 1.5 to 2 inches out. Now on this one in particular, it's because of the inner fender, the inner wheel tub in here. As this tire goes up this way, the back side of the tire will rub. So I got to get that rear end out. Now on the rear end, I could run a wheel spacer back here to get it to come out a little bit. It does put a little extra wear on the wheel bearings in here, but it's not too bad. The downside is, though, is on the front end. This is a little controversial subject, but you don't want to run excessive wheel spacers on your front end. And the reason why, I can get in here, easy way. You can see how the tire sets over the top of the spindle. It's actually designed for that setup. Now what it's doing is it's equalizing all of the weight of the car over the spindle. Now if you move this tire out and away from that point, you're doing two things. Number one, you're putting a whole bunch of weight onto the ball joints. And if I put 2-inch spacers on here with this offset of wheel and move that far out, what it'll do is it'll start eating ball joints. It'll eat them up because it's putting too much force on them. Number two, when that tire goes through its turning cycle, when you're turning the car, if you move the tire too far away from its fulcrum point that it's supposed to have on the spindle with the ball joints and everything, you move it out here, it'll actually scrub the tire across the pavement. It'll skid it as it goes through its turning cycle. Now that's bad on a couple of levels. For one, it makes it hard to steer, because every time you're steering it, you're actually skidding that tire across the pavement to try to get it to turn. And number two, when you're going down the road at pretty good speed, every time you turn the car, you're actually skidding it on the pavement, so it's a loss of control. So be very, very careful playing with wheel spacers to correct track width. Now the easy way to have corrected this would have just been use the four-wheel drive chassis, because the four-wheel drive is already set to the stock track width that this car had. Now the other one on these two-wheel drives, here I'll pop the hood here and show you. There, I got my trusty hood prop up here. Let's take a look inside here. Now if you look right down inside there, you can see on the two-wheel drive the control arms. Let's see, get that hose out of the way. You can see down in there how them control arms sit. They sit on top of the frame and they're kinked in. Now the reason they do that is because when on the two-wheel drive trucks, as they turn and they go through their motions and you're doing a higher speed corner, what that's doing is it's adjusting your camber to match whatever your car is doing at the time. So it's for control and handling. With that offset, funky, weird looking A-arm setup, as you go into the corner, it'll lay the tire over to keep it straight while you're turning and curving that truck, making it do what you want to do to maintain maximum traction all the way down along the line. Now you'll see this on them S10s with people that have lowered them, or more importantly, people that have bagging them, right? You put them on air ride suspension. Well, every one of them you see come into the car show or whatever, when they air down and go and set them trucks down, you watch the tires, everybody's seen it, they go and they lay over, or they go one way or the other. The camber changes on them and it looks like the tire's going to fall off or a ball joint just went bad, but it's the way it is. And then when it raises back up, the tire stands back up where it's supposed to be. On the four-wheel drive, because they were running that front diff in there with the drive axle going through it, they don't do that. They go up and down and that tire stays in its original plane. And like I said, they did it for the four-wheel drive to keep excessive wear from happening on the axle. But on these, you can put that front end wherever you want to put it simply by adjusting it there, and you don't have to worry about your camber changing because it stays on that equal plane. So that tire will always be wherever you want it to be when you change the ride height. It's kind of one of those little hidden missed little quirks about these four-wheel drives that very few people have talked about. But number one, the most important thing about them is the track width. Now, you see these reverse wheels on here like this? Like I said in the other one, much like a front wheel drive. Well, if you use standard ones like the rims that are on that Shoebox, because it's sitting on a two-wheel drive S10, you can put them on here and adjust that track width even more. But it doesn't affect the turning radius because it keeps it still in line with the spindle. So on these, you can go about that much farther out and still be plenty good on all your steering geometry, and you don't have to worry about tire scrub as it's turning back and forth. So that's another reason why I look for these little four-wheel drives and why they're just so dang versatile on how to put them into anything I want to put them in. Now also, you heard me talk about wheelbase and how wheelbase doesn't mean a bit of hill of beans to me. Actually, when I'm looking for these, to tell you the truth, I look for it to be a longer wheelbase than what I'm actually looking for. Why would I want it to be longer than what I'm looking for? Well, it's easier to shorten it than it is to lengthen it. That's the reason why. All you got to do is cut the frame and move it to wherever you need it. You know, cut however, if you want 112 but you got 115, well, it's much easier to just cut a little bit out, bring them together, fish plate it, and be done. You do have to get another driveline made, but drivelines, standard steel drivelines, they're relatively cheap to have done up. Anyway, I can't quote you prices on that because, well, they change. It depends on where you're at. We have a local shop here that specializes in drivelines, and the last one we had done was $125, and that's just, in car building prices, that's just cheap. Anyway, I hope that helps out there. And part of the other reasons I look for these great little universal S10s, keep these old girls out on the road where they belong, no matter what it is that might be sitting on there. So in the meantime, get out there and get some metal hot.